I'm live. I am reading out of Time Out of Mind. It's the autobiography by Joan Grant. I'm in the 5th part of this book. She is a seer. She can remember her far memories. And this book, this is now in the 30s, explains how it came to be, her early life. And this is chapter 3 of the last part, part 5, entitled SEKEETA. That's a character out of Winged Pharaoh. Halfway through the first course, I was glad that Leslie had brought me back when he did, for I had such an acute headache that it was difficult to finish the meal. In case I got an even more severe one, when I next tackled the scarab, I decided to postpone future sessions until after dinner, so that as soon as I finished I could go to bed. The next day was very happy, playing with Gillian in the garden, talking with Daisy, arranging flowers until after tea, when I began to feel apprehensive. Last night the degree of identification had a new intensity. What would happen to me if the other girl failed in her ordeals? If she died or went mad from terror, could sharing her experience affect me? Fortunately, none of the others realized I was nervous when I lay down on the sofa to begin work. "What do you want me to look for?" I asked, to postpone the moment when I must relax my body and collect my energy into a focal point of concentration. "Find out what happened to the poor girl after she was left all alone in that horrible tomb," said Elfie. "Get the name of the reigning pharaoh," said Leslie. "Look for something easier tonight," suggested Daisy. Sorry. Try to visit an Egyptian garden and see if you can identify some of the plants. I was not able to answer any of their questions, for that evening, as on many subsequent evenings, I had to take what came. Sometimes I saw a scene in which included the girl, SEKEETA, as though I was watching her, and other times I saw through her eyes, sharing her present. I'm 3 years old. Our house has a garden with a blue pool and little scarlet fish, which I feed with millet. The child prattled on about her pets, her toys, a child who might just as well have belonged to any other century. The only thing of any real interest I noticed is that Egyptians were all very tall people, I said when I had finished. The child's nurse, for instance, must have been well over 6 feet. How odd that none of the archaeologists noticed it when they were examining mummies. Or do you think the embalming would have shrunk the bones? "No, I don't," said Leslie, "but there is a tribe in Africa who may be descended from ancient Egyptians. They're all very tall and still have horned cattle which closely resembles the cattle of the tomb paintings." He was quite excited about it until on the following evening the girl was 14 years old, and I realized the average height of an adult male Egyptian was only about 5'8". "But you said last night that they were remarkably tall," protested Leslie. "I know I did, but I was seeing grown-ups through the eyes of a small child. When my nurse is angry, she is as tall as a pillar," is how she described it to herself. I often found myself in SEKEETA's bedroom in the temple. She was not gregarious by nature, and it was the only place where she could be certain of privacy. The bed is wooden, the sides made in the likeness of Anubis, his jackal paws being the feet of the bed. There's only one window high in the wall, and under it is a little shelf with an earthen jar, which I filled with flowers so that I can look at them when I leave my body, instead of on a white wall, as usual. Today the jar is filled with blue and white striped convolvulus. Beside the bed is a wax tablet on which I record with a sharpened reed what I do when I'm away from my body. This I do immediately I return to it. Before I sleep, I smooth the wax with a little roller, not only to make it ready to write on in the following morning, but to remind me to smooth through thoughts of the day's happening from my mind, so that it is ready to receive memory. Usually I saw her wearing a white tunic and plain sandals of undecorated leather, but she sometimes thought of far more elaborate clothes. I described these in detail, which she used to wear before coming to the temple. These clothes provided a clue that she had not been born into a peasant family. Do try to find out the name of the pharaoh, urged Leslie. It would be much more interesting if we knew what dynasty she lived in. I thought I should be able to answer this question when I found myself standing in a crowd of people by the roadside where a royal procession would pass on its way to celebrate a festival. I waited there a long time and was worried because I had left the temple without permission. I could see the pennants fluttering in the wind, green and scarlet pennants on gilded poles every 100 cubits, and the garlands of scarlet poppies which linked them together. I could smell the flowers which the women wore as wreaths and as necklaces, and the sweat of the bodies that jostled against me in the crowd. Further up the road the people began to chant, "Pharaoh approaches, our life is renewed in the sight of our Father. The people of Calm are the children of Pharaoh, and we rejoice with our Father in the sight of the gods." The chanting was drawing close to me when I heard Leslie say, "What is the name of the Pharaoh? Get his name, Joan." His voice brought me far back so fast that I could remember exactly what I had been seeing. "I might have done if you hadn't interrupted me," I said crossly. "SEKEETA must have had a very literal mind, because when she thinks about Pharaoh, instead of visualizing him as a remote god-man holding the crook and flail, he only reminds her of her own father, a man of about 30, playing with his children in a garden or sailing in a small boat on the Nile." Excuse me. A man of about 30 playing with his children in a garden or sailing in a small boat on the Nile. "It's a pity she was not someone of more social importance," Leslie remarked, "for then she might have seen Pharaoh in audience or been taken by her family to offer tribute at the palace. That would certainly have made sufficient impression for her to have been aware of his name." "I wonder what made her go into the temple," said Daisy thoughtfully. "I get the impression that she was such an active and loving person, as though she was not really dedicated to the cloistered life." She went into the temple to please her mother. SEKEETA had many true dreams, and her mother taught her to be glad of them, even of those that were frightening. She taught me a prayer. "Master of thy wisdom, let me grow into a great tree, so that the sorrowful may rest in my shade and go on their journey." Calm is the old name for Egypt, pronounced calm. Yeah. "In my shade and go on their journey. Refreshed and the weary regain their strength in the shelter of my branches." "You ought to have warned me that you were going out," said Leslie reprovingly. "You went so suddenly that I realized only just in time to write down the prayer that you were dictating and not just theorizing." He read the prayer back to me. It moved me almost to tears. I looked at Daisy, and there was such long love for me in her eyes that I felt safe and cherished, as the little SEKEETA had been in the love of her mother. The next evening I started to describe how SEKEETA, as a child of about 10, saw a man badly mauled during a lion hunt. Then the telephone rang and brought me back abruptly. "More about the lion hunt," said Leslie a few minutes later. It sounded as though it was going to be exciting. I thought so too, but instead of getting back to the place where the thread had snapped, I got a long and rather dull sequence when SEKEETA first went to the temple and was playing a game with several other pupils, none of whom she liked very much. It was a simple game. A silver disc was thrown into a swimming pool and they all dived in to see who would reach it first by swimming underwater. "I wonder if she ever fell in love," said Alfie wistfully. "It must have happened sometimes when young men and young women were living in the same temple, even if they were very serious-minded." In reply, the scarab gave me 2 poems that had been written to SEKEETA. These Dio sent to me, beautifully scribed in colours, on a little roll of papyrus. "I am a sculptor that has lost his hands, and an orchard where no water flows. I am a sailing boat on a still day, and a bird that cannot move its wings. I am a lotus in a dried-up pool, and a bow whose string is broken. I am a sanctuary without a god, and a night without and a night sky without stars, for I had to leave you upon a long journey, and you gave me not your heart to take with me. And later he sent her, the seed is planted, and the grain springs from the furrow. The fishermen cast their net, and it is leaping with fish. The vintagers press out the grapes, and the wine jars are filled. The throwing stick flies through the air, and the bird falls to the hunter. The noonday sun is hot, but the shadows grow long in the cool of the evening. I have given you my heart, but will you give me yours? Was he really a sculptor? Asked Elfie. Yes, he was. She met him when he was carrying a frieze on when he was carving a frieze on one of the temple buildings. Didn't I say so? No. You read the poem, and then you were silent for so long I thought you'd gone to sleep, said Leslie. Dio was a foreigner, and he had red hair. SEKEETA tried to make him believe in the gods, but I don't think she succeeded. Surely a temple pupil was unlikely to fall in love with an atheist, commented Leslie. Perhaps she was secretly pleased to find someone who loved her as a woman instead of being awed by her power as a priest. Being a priest is often very lonely, but she did her best to convert him to her ideas. When I was out just now, I was sharing a long conversation with him. I suppose I got so caught up in it that I forgot to make my body talk. Wait a moment, and I will try to get it again. But that evening I only recorded a small part of what they were saying to each other. SEKEETA, will you always ponder on strange immensities? Leave all these thoughts until you need their warmth, when you feel cold, when the wind is blowing from your tomb. Why spoil the joy of a sycamore tree at noon, when it patterns the dust in shadows? What does it matter who made it or why it is here? Rejoice in the sunshine, and do not think of it as one of your ponderous gods. Think of the river as clear in water in which we can bathe, and not as a symbol of interminable life. While you are young, rejoice and think not of the past. Be grateful for beauty, and do not always compare it to a vision which you think puts it in the shadow. Delight in music, and do not listen to echoes from the stars. When you are old, you may have to bemuse your loneliness with memories, but now you do not need them, for the present is glorious before your eyes. One day I shall take you from this ancient land, where people are grave with too much wisdom, and take you to Minoas, where their hearts sing with youth. Did he ever take her to Minoa? Asked Alfie. I do hope so. Minoa is Crete now, isn't it? And Crete is such a nice place, especially in spring when the tulips are out, apart from the fleas. But perhaps there weren't so many fleas in the old days. I don't think she ever went there with Dio. I think I should know if she had, and yet I have a very vague impression that she did go to Minoas. There were only 3 more days before we had to go back to Scotland. The weather was sultry, with thunder brooding in the distance, and I was depressed, because I must soon leave Daisy. I was determined to get a lot more about SEKEETA for her, but try as I would to get out of my body, nothing happened. I could have cried with frustration, for the scarab seemed as empty as a pebble from the beach. Perhaps you have been doing too much and need a rest, Daisy said consolingly. But I tried the next evening and still got nothing, not even a trivial fragment, which would at least have shown that the scarab was still warm. Surely there would be something on my last evening. For an hour or more I tried to force myself to remember, but all I succeeded in doing was to increase the dull headache, which was not due to magic, but only to the weather. At last I had to admit failure. It is finished. I almost wish I had never started, for now I shall never know what happened to her. It's worse than reading a few pages of an enthralling manuscript and then finding that the rest of it has been burned by an idiot housemaid. What makes it even more infuriating is that I am the idiot housemaid. I feel so hopelessly inefficient to be something grander, like a musician who wakes up one morning and finds he's gone deaf. You must keep the scarab as a memento of happy evenings, said Daisy gently. Perhaps one day it will have more to tell you. This was the end of chapter 3 of the 5th part of Time Out of Mind.